Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Before we get going on this episode, I want to thank the sponsors of the podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com, Cody Nelson, my friend of 20 plus years. I call him the glassing guru, the optics authority. He's the optics manager at GoHunt.com. If you guys have any optics needs at all, whether it be binoculars, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, tripods, anything to do with glassing, give the glassing guru a call. You can reach Cody at 702-847-8747. That's extension 2. You can email him at optics@gohunt.com, or you can text him directly on his cell phone at 602-399-3699. Ask him any question either by text or by call. I want to thank Cody for all the work that he does with the J. Scott Outdoors podcast listeners. I also want to remind you guys it's application season. There's not a better hunting resource than the Go Hunt Insider. For a free trial, you can go to gohunt.com/jscott. You can also get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card when signing up. I want to thank KUYU.com, KUYU Ultralight Hunting. KUYU is the ultralight hunting gear that I've been wearing since 2010. Go to KUIU.com and you can order directly. It's a direct-to-consumer brand, and they have phenomenal gear there at KUIU.com. I also want to thank Phonescope.com. Use the JScott21 promo code to get 10% off on all orders. Also, Apex Ammunition. During turkey season, the podcast gets sponsored by Apex Ammunition. Go to apexmunition.com. It's the home of the TSS, the Tungsten Super Shot. It's the best turkey loads on the market. Go to apexmunition.com. Guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. I also want to let you guys know that are listening for Colorado information. I actually have a few elk and mule deer tags available in Colorado on private land if you guys have an interest. Also doing an elk bear archery combo. Reach out to me at jscottoutdoors on Instagram or jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. Reach out, and for more information I'll be happy to share it with you. Let's get right to this episode. Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have my friend Cole Ullom out of Tenderfoot Outfitters. Cole is also one of my fishing buddies there in the Glenwood Springs, Roaring Fork Valley area. Cole, how you doing?
Doing good, Jay. How about yourself?
Good. It looks like the rivers are low, and snowpack, at least in that Roaring Fork Valley is definitely not 100%, but it looks like Denver got blasted.
Yeah, it sure did. Just enough to show the Californians how not to drive. But yeah, they did. I mean, there's 4 feet of snow down there on that I-25 corridor. But yeah, this big storm that come through last week, we really didn't. We got a few inches on the ground, but nothing substantial. The high country has some snow, and I know the ski areas are still staying open, but like you said, the rivers are in pretty rough shape right now. So,
how long has it been since you've seen the Colorado as low as the Colorado River is right now?
Man, I honestly can't say, Jay. Probably maybe 2001, and because I mean, you probably remember what was that summer of 2019? We were pretty low, and we had all the stop fishing.
Yeah.
Ordinances put in place, and I mean last year, I mean you probably remember into mid-July. I mean it wasn't a month and a half after runoff. We were bony, and it seems like the rivers haven't came back up. I mean it just can't seem to get out of these drought conditions. And but yeah, I've never vividly in my life remember the Colorado below Glenwood Springs dipping below 1,000 CFS.
Yeah.
I know it was in the 900s, and the Roaring Fork looks like an irrigation ditch right now. So definitely needs some of this late spring snow to come through for us.
You know, with that being said, I mean, March historically is a big moisture month for that area. So let's hope that it turns around. You're kind of born and raised, maybe actually not born in Colorado, maybe born in Wyoming?
No, I'm born and raised in Colorado.
Okay. Born and
Fourth
raised
generation.
in Meeker, right?
Yeah,
Area?
it was. Yeah, I was born in Meeker, one of the very last ones. But yeah, I've lived in Northwest Colorado majority of my life. I had a short stint in Northwest Wyoming, but
Okay.
80%, 90% of my life has been right here in the Roaring Fork and White River valleys.
Okay, sounds good. I'm looking at the Colorado big game regulations, and we have a deadline of April 6th for the deer, elk, pronghorn, moose, and bear, sheep, goat, the whole 9 yards. Um, I want to talk to you about several of the units and several of the animals, what's going on there. But I do have a couple questions. One is the primary draw is April 6th, but then there's this secondary draw June 30th. What
Yes.
exactly is that?
So kind of what they're doing with the secondary draw. I mean, honestly, I haven't really. I think last year was the first year they did it, and I didn't. I honestly haven't dabbled in it, but basically, it's basically a draw for what's left over. So they're basically doing a secondary. It's kind of like the second choice draw. So basically, everything that's left over is moving into that secondary draw, and then whatever's after that will be going to the leftover list. And I honestly haven't read up on it. I don't play that leftover game
Okay.
real heavy, but I know there's going to be some substantial changes to the leftover tags and the reissued list that a lot of people are gung ho on.
Sure.
But
When we look at these applications, um, one of the things that jumps out at me is the season structure dates have bounced back so late. And, where I think it impacts probably hunting, whether it be quality of hunting right now, but overall impact down the road, what I look at mostly is the mature mule deer um, population, if you will. And I talked to Cliff Gray about this a little bit on the podcast, but what's your ideas as far as these late season structures for ultimate impact on the mule deer?
oh, I think it's. I mean, I'm right on the same page with you on it. I think it's going to crush us. I mean, we're already. I mean, we've a lot of us guys here. We've talked about it, and our mature deer numbers are just down to begin with. There's just not a lot of bucks that are in that 4+ age class, and this winter running around. I mean, I spend a lot of time in the Eagle Valley, Eagle County, Gunnison County, Rio Blanco, like all these pretty historically well-known mule deer counties, and usually I'll see some, just giants roll in about, let's say after Thanksgiving and January, and I honestly haven't seen very many bucks that I would say are in that 180 plus class. So what I'm thinking is what everyone else is thinking. If these late dates and if the weather lines up, it's could be the straw that breaks the camel's back as far as mature age class deer, and it's sad. I totally disagree with it. I think if we were gonna do this, the tag numbers need to be cut substantially.
Right. In other words, if you're going to have this late season structure date, you know that the deer are going to be sitting ducks out there on the winter range, if you will,
Oh,
and
most definitely.
be running like dogs. Okay,
Hmm.
if you're going to do these dates, but cut the tags way back. From what I
Yeah.
understand, there is actually like a push to lower the age class of the deer because they're worried about chronic wasting disease, right? That's what they're saying they did it for.
I mean, I can't say for the rest of the state, but they've really been pushing that model in the northwest half of the state, and that's been going on for 2 years now. They did a big tag hike in units 22, 11, 211, 3, 301, that real northwest corner, and where I basically 22 is basically my backyard right now, and historically that was a great unit. It produced some great bucks, and those bucks kind of bounced back and forth from a really well-known unit, Unit 21. And I know some locals that have, burnt some serious amount of points on tags in there for the 4th rifle. We're talking 15 plus points as a resident. And going out there for 5 days in a unit they spent their whole lives in and can't turn a deer up over 160 inches. So that's definitely negatively impacted that area. I can't say if that's why they're doing it. I think it's just I don't know. I wish I truly knew the reason why, Jay, because we go, people like myself and Connor Clark really well down there in Gunnison. We attend these, these meetings and these mule deer objectives and whatever, and it's just like in one ear and out the next with CPW these days. They don't care. I think if there was one deer left in the state, they'd sell 3 tags for it.
Yeah. With the dates being as late as they are, I'm wondering how it's going to affect the elk hunting as you get into those 3rd and 4th seasons. With the second rifle, which is let's call it it's actually the first rifle elk season, right? So it's October 30th through.
It's the first combined season, so it's the first season of elk and mule deer with a rifle.
Right, and then you go 3rd rifle, that's November 13th to the 19th, and 4th rifle, November 24th through the 28th. How's that going to affect elk moving back? Obviously not because of the rutting, or because of the deer rutting, it affects the deer, and because of the deer going out in the winter range. But do you think it will actually make the elk hunting better or worse?
It's going to depend on the unit, really. For those migration heavy hunts, probably will make it better, honestly, because a lot of those units, like up around north of Meeker and that way, it's going to put those elk down into that, sage country essentially, and put elk on the winter range, which, our elk numbers are pretty good, but it's definitely going to kill some elk come that 3rd, 4th rifle when they're down. Those higher country units, like where I outfit out of, let's say 54, it's going to put those elk down on the sage country, on the winter range there in Gunnison even.
Well, that leads me to my question and then I want to bounce back to the later dates of the first rifle on elk. But so by hunting them later, they'll be moving in their migration down to lower country. In essence, doesn't that, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but doesn't that, by hunting them that late, it almost puts a lot of those elk on private property, does it not? Don't they move down? And some of those private pieces, obviously it depends on what unit you're in, but almost taking opportunity away from people.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, totally. Gunnison is a great example of that 54. A lot of those elk, when they come out of the West Elks, they'll dive right on that Ohio Creek Valley, and they're locked up. There's 3 giant ranches right there, and I've seen it where there's over 1,000 head, pushing 2,000 head locked up on that. So, yeah, that's definitely going to be a big reality there. And even some of these deer hunts, for instance, when those deer transition out of that higher country, that mid-level, and they get down into winter range, a lot of that's going to be private. So that, in essence, that could save us some deer and also take some opportunity away as far as elk. So it's kind of a give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how Colorado is. We're so diverse. It's going to make some units really change the dynamic of that November hunt, and some of others it might make it better. But a lot of times, some of these high country units, these bulls, you've probably seen it, the cows and the younger bulls, they'll kick out, and those big mature bulls, they'll bachelor up, and they'll stay high. I've seen elk over in Gunnison and in the Maroon Bells, and anywhere they have that ability, they'll stay up where the snow's hitting them in the belly and Thanksgiving and just won't pull out of there. So it could change some things, but I'm not really thinking that it's going to change the elk hunting as much as it's going to affect the deer hunting in a negative aspect.
Let me ask you a question about first rifle elk, October 16th through the 20th. Now that season has bumped back as well, if I'm thinking right.
Yep.
Where normally it's a little bit earlier, where that season you're getting quite a bit of bugling. Do you think bumping back will kind of hurt that across the board on some of those first rifle units that are really good?
Yeah, it could change that for sure. First season, it's dabbled. I've seen it start as early as the 10th and traditionally the 15th. But I mean, you might catch some tail end, but if you're a guy sitting there looking at like those primo first rifle tags, let's say like a 61 or a 76 or 40 or any of those units that offer that first rifle, you want to be in there as early into October as you can, because like we've said before, I've always said October 1st is the peak of the rut in Colorado, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, you could still see some of those late cycle estrus cows coming around that second week of October, but you know how it is with Colorado elk. They're pretty spooky, and seems like once those guns go off for the first day or two, those elk, they get tight-lipped and they start changing their habits real quick.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about, I want to start on the elk. I want to talk about the area where you guide there at Tenderfoot Outfitters 54 over there in the Gunnison area. What opportunities do you guys have over there for people that want to hunt?
Well, we've got obviously our elk seasons. So primarily we focus on elk archery through second rifle. And those are all going to be high country wilderness horseback hunts. And then moving into the third, fourth rifle season, our primary focus is going to be mule deer down in the lower country, obviously, because we typically pull our base camp out after that second rifle season because, one, the snow gets deep up in that country, and two, those elk, obviously, they're going to move down, so we kind of change our tactics. But primarily into November, we start focusing on mule deer more heavily. And on top of that, we also do sheep and moose.
Are all of your hunts there in wilderness, are they all guided, or are they drop camp too, or some DIY? What's the breakup there?
Okay, so all our elk hunts we do offer drop camps, yes. So our elk hunts are all on wilderness, and then those third, fourth season mule deer hunts are 50-50 because we have access to private land and also public land when we move down into the mule deer hunts.
Okay, and then do you also do archery elk hunts that are guided? So not only is it in the wilderness, it's a drop camp style where
Yep.
a string of horses, but you're also left with one of your guides there, or is most of the business just dropping guys off and letting them hunt their stuff?
We've actually kind of moved back. We really are more focused on the guided hunts. We used to run a lot of drop camps. We've kind of scaled our drop camps back. We're usually running 2 different drop camps at a time, and those can be really productive for guys that have that ambition and will get out and hunt. And we locate our drop camps far enough away that they don't conflict with our guided hunters. So with our drop camp hunters, you have your own space, and you can be as successful as you want. Actually, some of the biggest bulls actually killed in our outfit for probably the last almost 10 years running have been out of our drop camp hunters in the archery season, and it kind of makes me scratch my head sometimes why I'm giving the drop camp hunters that country when we could be hauling, but there has been our Price Creek drop camp. Traditionally, every year archery season and black powder will produce a bull over 300, and it's actually some years it's produced multiple bulls over that 300-inch mark.
Okay.
And
then your guided hunts, what kind of shape the guys have to be in? Can a guy that's just in average shape still do well, or do they have to really be in tip-top shape to do well?
No, you can be in. I mean, obviously, that's the advantage we have with the horses is I can work with somebody who's in middle of the ground shape. The biggest thing where honestly, riding a horse is a physical activity, and a lot of people don't realize it. It wears on your legs, your hips, your core, and if you have, poor core strength, and that can definitely affect you even on a horseback hunt. But definitely, I mean, as a guide yourself, Jay, like, we'll never complain about having a guy show up in shape. Like, but definitely, you don't have to be running triathlons to do this hunt. It is tough country, yes. The horses do allow us to access, get you into tougher terrain. But at that point, we're not, ideally you ride up, jump off the horse and
Go hunt.
bang, bang. But a lot of times we're tying horses up and then proceeding on foot. I actually try to use the horses as little as possible, but, the client kind of dictates that for me.
What are the draws like for those hunts as far as in 54, in wilderness area? What are guys looking at? Are some of these tags over the counter, or some of them draw? How does it sit?
So our archery, our muzzleloader, first rifle, and our fourth rifle have all moved to draw. The second, third rifle is going to be over the counter with a cap. So it's not a over the counter free for all. What they'll do is they kind of similar to like what Idaho does or used to do is there's a set number of tags to be sold, and when that quota is met on those tags, everything's sold out. But traditionally, we did actually do some tag cuts in the past year. So traditionally, we were getting guys, non-residents, that archery tag as a first choice. And now, with this past year and kind of looking at the way things are shaking out, you're going to need a preference point to draw that archery tag now. The muzzleloader tag is taking 5 to 6 points as a non-resident right now. And then first rifle is probably, if you're 100% odds, you're probably talking at least one preference point also.
Okay, and can guys have a deer tag, draw a deer tag as well, and hunt deer and elk at the same time?
Yep, we have done that many times. I have guys that'll do muzzleloader archery for deer or even second rifle, and we can do that. We have done it in the past. I always tell guys, I mean, it's a 5-day hunt, 7 days total, so we have a day packing in, packing out, and I really kind of advise guys, like, let's try to just focus on one animal and one hunt, because sometimes
too much.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it is, Jay. You're like, oh, let's hunt deer today, or oh, we need to hunt elk. And honestly, like, traditionally, that muzzleloader hunt was very good in 54. And you can look at some of the bucks on our website. We've killed some, 190, 200 type deer out of that high country. But it seems like as of recent in 54, that resident deer herd has gotten rather poor, and I don't see the deer in the basins like I do. Like, we'll see. I can turn a buck up or two in the basins, but anymore I feel like majority of the deer that end up in Unit 54 are actually migratory deer from 53. And I'd say I'm about 100% positive of that. And the division does their counts, obviously, in the wintertime when animals are on the winter range, but what they don't take into account is, what is actually a resident deer.
Right. There's no way for them really to know, and when they count them, they just assume they're resident deer. I would. That's what I'm thinking.
It's totally true. But yeah, a lot of those deer out of 53 actually will migrate south, and they do actually come into 54 more so than obviously the resident deer push down. But I think like those early hunts in 54, if guys want to do them, I'll still hunt them, but they're just not. I just advise guys and tell them, these high country hunts over here, they're not what they were 10, 15 years ago.
Wait, you're an outfitter and you're telling the truth?
Yeah, believe it or not. And there for a while, Jay, after that winter of 07 or 08, I mean, I'd like to say it kind of says something when guys were calling us, asking us, they wanted to book third season deer hunts in 54, and we were turning them away. Because we, just honestly told guys, like, I cannot take your money to, drive you out there and maybe find one buck. And at the time, we just felt like it was the right thing to do. It's not to be harvesting those deer because we needed every buck on that, winter range we could get just for breeding standpoint.
Right.
And I mean, we honestly didn't start running deer hunts in third, fourth rifle season in Unit 54 until I think 2017 was the first one we did after the winter kill. So almost
10 years.
Almost gave it 10 years. And, because it's, you got that many preference points invested. And, I mean, you want a guy to make good on those points. And, sometimes being honest and turning the money away works out a little better for your reputation in the long run.
For sure. Let me ask you a question about your bear hunting while you're hunting these 54 wilderness hunts. How is the bear hunting, and can guys get those bear tags at the same time, or are they over the counter, or they draw? What are they?
Oh, you can actually possess 2 bear tags in Colorado right now. You can have an A class and B class bear tag. So if you have a valid elk tag, you can also pick up a bear tag over the counter and carry it as a Class B license. While also, like a Class A, you could get the early rifle tag, which is the September 2nd through the rest of the month. And with bears, obviously, the earlier into the fall you can get, the better. So what I like to tell guys to do is those archery and muzzleloader hunters really look into that early rifle tag. And a lot of times, if we do fill out early, a lot of times the best way to kill them is right off your gut pile of the bull you killed.
And you're choked up with bears right now, aren't you?
Oh, terrible. And really, Gunnison County, there wasn't a lot of bears in there traditionally. I mean, there was always been bears, but this past year, in September, while we were doing a moose hunt, I honestly lost track to how many bear tracks I cut. It was insane. Like every government trail, every horse trail, I mean, there was a bear track going down it, and it's insane. I mean, they're pretty much everywhere in western Colorado. Bears are they're just popping up in numbers, and it's just goes to show we've had a pretty poor management strategy on our predators here.
Let me ask you a specific question about antler point restrictions. I'm looking here. It says an antler point is a projection of an antler at least 1 inch long and which is longer than the width of its base. A brow tine means a projection of antler at least 5 inches long located on the lower half of the antler. Restrictions. Bull elk taken in all seasons must have 4 points or more on one antler or a brow tine of at least 5 inches long. So not all, correct me if I'm wrong, but not all of the units in Colorado have the restriction, or no, all of Colorado has restrictions on antler points.
No. So there are units where a spike bull or a bull below equal, of that legal stature is. So you definitely have to read up on that. There's I believe there's units like 48, 49. Like if you look in the brochure, that they don't apply to those given units.
Yeah, so I see 1, 2, 10, 20, 29, 30, 40, 46, 48, 49, 50, 51, 56, 57, 58, 61, 69, 76, 84, 791. They don't apply.
Yep. So basically all your draw tags, it does not apply. So all the OTC units, there is that antler restriction. But if you're crazy enough to shoot a spike bull on a draw tag, then more power to you.
In your mind, does the antler point restriction help or hurt, or does it matter?
It's totally helped us. My dad can tell me stories back in the 90s before that 4 point or 5 inch brow tine restriction was put in. Mm-hmm. And he said, I was a little kid in these days, but he said finding a branch antlered bull was a huge accomplishment back then.
Meaning guys were just whacking anything. Oh,
spike bulls were in trouble all the time. Like that was what most guys shot on a bull tag, was a spike bull. Like if you killed a branch antlered 5 point bull back in the early mid '90s, like you ran that thing up and down Main Street in your truck like you just won the Daytona 500. And then once they put that in place, I remember the struggle at that point was there was so few bulls that had even lived to be 2.5, 3 years old in the years prior. That, I mean, Dad's telling me stories about sitting out there north of Meeker and looking over 300 head of elk and can't find a legal bull to shoot.
Wow.
But in that 20-year span or more, it's improved the over-the-counter elk opportunity of harvesting a mature age class bull exceptionally more. We do it every year now, killing 300-inch bulls on over-the-counter tags, and I see them in about every unit I walk into. Like this past year, I actually kind of went back to my old stomping grounds in my 4th rifle and hunted around Meeker. And as a kid, a 6-point bull was a huge deal, and a bull that would break the 300-inch mark was out of the question. And I would confidently say I've seen 4 bulls this year on a pretty heavily hunted unit that would break that mark. So I think it's definitely improved us. But I have no complaints with it.
Would they ever go to a 6-point restriction?
Oh, that'd be cool.
What would that do?
Well, that would put us to the next level, but that would be a really hard thing to push.
Right.
I think a 5-point even would be fine, but then we'd get in that dilemma of, because you know how it is, you get those bulls that are just giant 5 points. They're old, they're mature.
Right.
And then you'd be sitting there like, well, dang it, I can't shoot a 300-inch 5-point, but I can shoot that 250-inch 6-point.
Right.
But I don't know. I think it's been good. I think the brow time thing is a really gray area. With my hunters, I tell them we don't play that game. Like, if he's got 3 points, like, we're not going to sit there and measure brow tines. I pretty much solely go off of that bull has to have 4 points on one side.
Right.
Before
that's a slippery slope when you start having to measure points.
Yeah, and guys will be like, it's just not a good thing. And I've seen game wardens have to, confiscate bulls that are, they're 3x3s and they've got a short brow or just weird stuff. But I really push on my hunters that we don't play the brow time game. It's got to have 4 points. And usually what I try to tell them is if there's a split off the main beam. So I'm looking for, a 5th point, let's say, coming off the main beam of a bull that age. And if if he comes straight up and doesn't have anything coming off the back of the main beam, then you need to question it.
I'm bouncing around here, but it's at the I don't want to forget it. In Colorado, with the deer, you can apply for a preference point as your first choice and apply your second choice for some of these deer units and draw on your second choice. But with the dates being later this year, in your opinion, is what people think are guarantees going to go away on some of those second choice, second season, third season deer tags? Do you think that game's going to get played to the max?
Oh yeah, I think kind of what I'm seeing, with the chatter going on is I think it's Colorado's like going to be like the Klondike of mule deer this year. Like everybody's trying to get here because everybody's seeing these dates, and I have guys message me all the time like, oh, I've got one preference point and I've got to go hunting. And but I definitely see these hunts that I've been living and dying by for the last 10 years. I'm gonna have to really consider, if I'm deer hunting and I want to go, it's gonna have to be first choice instead of second choice.
Yeah, because you look at the option, before these season date changes. Now you're talking about potentially drawing a second, a second rifle deer tag October 30th to November 7th. And those last few days of that hunt, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th of November, potentially getting some rutting action.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that adds an element there where I think everyone is going to really play that game out. Let's talk real fast about your idea of the top 5 or 6 deer units as far as quality, not in reference to preference points, anything as far as quality units with the best bucks, top 5-6 units in Colorado for deer.
So my top picks, we're talking genetically speaking. Top unit still to me is 44, just on the fact of the Giants are still there. Still can be a pretty dang tough hunt, but it just has the legend behind it. And then number 2 would be 66 there in the Gunnison Basin. That would probably be my top pick for somebody who is not very knowledgeable with 44. Numbers are a little better, and those deer are down in that. There's more, per se, resident deer in that lower country. So it's a good opportunity to look over a lot more bucks and pass some deer versus the 44 hunt. You might be there for 5 days before you see one. Number 3, I'd say 67, which would be your neighbor to 66 to the east. Very similar genetics to 66. A little lower on the deer numbers, but still a chance of the giant there. Number 4, I'm going to go with 55. They're in the Gunnison Basin also. Kind of same story as the rest of the basin. Impacted pretty heavy in 07-08 winter. Winter of 18 was relatively hard on it also, but still the genetics are there and still producing some big bucks to guys that will work for them. Then number 5, I'm going to go with Unit 40. Unit 40 has pretty good numbers right now. There are some great bucks in there. Definitely something to look at if you are in that lower end of the points game. So let's say that 5 to 10 point range or higher. Pretty tough hunt if you're going to do it on the public land, just because it's a logistical nightmare with private. But if you're willing to go guided or you're pursuing a landowner tag, that would be my choice on that side of things. But some really good bucks coming off that private land through some outfitters over there.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the same question about elk as far as quality, top 5 or 6 picks for quality elk.
Okay. Number 1, I'm going to give it to 201. That's obviously the hardest unit to draw in the state. That's residents, we're looking at 25 plus points, and non-residents, you're knocking on the door of 30 right now. But just a cool hunt, cool country. Good opportunity to look at a lot of bulls with a pretty good chance of a 350 plus type bull if you can stay off the trigger. Number 2 would be the neighbor to the east, Unit 2. That's actually my personal favorite unit in the state. Same story, really high bull to cow ratio, lots of public land, and the opportunity to hunt bulls on October 1st with a rifle in your hands, which is something that's pretty special that a lot of places in the state you don't have the opportunity to do. Number 3, I'm going to go Unit 10, which is to the south. That's right north of Dinosaur, kind of bordering the Dinosaur National Monument, like Unit 2, but same story. A lot of good bulls, a lot of elk, similar opportunities in season structure as that to Unit 2 and 201. Number 4, I'm going to say Unit 40. Unit 40 is kind of the same story with deer, a lot of private, but really high number of bulls. And if you are willing to go outfitted or you can pay the trespass fee and get on the private, that can be a really good hunt. And I personally feel that 40 is on par with the caliber of bulls of, say, like a Unit 10 or 2 even. But a lot of bulls in that 300 to 340 type class, with a few breaking the 350 mark every year. And then my number 5 pick is going to be Unit 851, the Bosque del Oso State Wildlife Area, the Hill Ranch the Hill Ranch Ranch and Wildlife Tag, and also the Trinchera Ranch Ranch and Wildlife Tag. All really good opportunities down there. Some big bulls to be had. That Bosque del Oso hunt, definitely you want to look at that one as late as possible, because those bulls primarily filter in there in November. They migrate off the Hill Ranch. But I personally had that tag, and it's been a while, 2010, but pretty fun hunt. You're I mean, things could have changed. It's been a minute since I've been down there, but really good opportunity at taking a 330 plus bull. But you're going to have to weed through a lot of broken bulls there. But definitely one of the better opportunities and cooler hunts in the state.
Okay, then the $1 million question is that everyone gets is those OTC elk hunts, whether it be archery elk, second season, third season, over-the-counter elk units. Can you talk areas, regions? Can you talk about areas that you don't like? What information can you give about OTC elk out there? Because there's so many people craving for information.
Right.
What info could you share with people as far as, the goods,
Oh,
the bad, the ugly, whatever?
yeah. I've always said with over-the-counter elk hunting is basically make a map of all the OTC units, close your eyes, and throw a dart at it. Because guys want like a unit, and I'll tell you because I bounce around, and each one of them has their pros and cons. I mean, if you were to ask me what's the best over-the-counter elk unit, I would say the one the best, honestly. So really, the key with those OTC units is kind of pick one that, let's say the terrain fits your style. So if you crave, that high country, style hunt, maybe you want to look, more in the central half of the state in those clustering units, or, the Flat Tops Wilderness area. You can look in the Maroon Bells, the Raggeds, a lot of opportunities there. Those hunts can be pretty good, especially if you're a guy that's looking for kind of one of those next level bulls on those oak. Sorry about that. I forgot to put the phone on Do Not Disturb, but
No problem.
anyways, those higher country units, let's say the Central Rockies areas, that country's rough and rugged. I mean, you know how it is, Jay, right around the Aspen area, for instance. I mean, that it's straight up and down, and it's not the highest numbers of elk, but it gives bulls a chance to, grow up a little bit. But if you're more into the lower, more accessible kind of country, then, let's say something in the northwest half of the state might be more up your ball game. But really the key to it all is picking it and just keep hunting it, because really experience and time spent trumps everything over how good an OTC unit really is. Because you've just got to get in there. You got to learn the country. You got to learn those elk. And I've honestly said to some guys, a lot of people are worried about how far can I get from the road. And to be honest with you, there seems to be more and more people that think that 5 mile mark is like, the golden ticket. And I've honestly killed more elk OTC within a mile to 2 miles of the road. Like, you don't really need to get that deep. It's just kind of spending the time and learning a given unit that you choose to. And, you might not strike gold the first time. It might take 3 years, but definitely more of a commitment.
I think that's the thing that strikes me the most when people ask me, and they ask me all the time, they're like, you're up there fishing, what's the best OTC elk? I'm like, I don't know. I don't spend any time in there prowling around. Like, it's the last thing that I do. And I think that people just think it's over the counter, so there's got to be 2 or 3 areas that are better than everywhere else. And it's like, it doesn't really work that way. And I kind of like what you're saying about, whatever one the best. Like, pick a couple units and go spend a bunch of time in there. Hunt them for 3 or 4 years, and you'll figure out what you like and what you don't like. But, I mean, I think you could pick any OTC unit in the state and go there and find elk. And I think you could pick any OTC unit in the state and go there and hate it as well. I mean, like, there's parts of the unit that you're going to like, and there's parts that you're not going to like. There's, the parts that you like might be choked with people, might be too steep a terrain, there's all these factors that it's such a crazy piece of the puzzle that, so many people just want, a starting point, but the reality is they just want you to tell them where to go where they can find elk. And it's like, anymore, go find your own elk.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but like, You
Yeah.
know, it's OTC, it's over the counter. Like, do you think someone's going to give you their spot to go when, you know,
Yeah.
you tell 8 people and then, you know, there's 40 people there the next year at the trailhead?
Yeah, and it's already, congested enough. And I always tell people when you find that gym, keep it tight and,
Yeah. And
but
shoot a couple bulls, because the reality is it's probably going to change because the word gets out. And I don't mean to
yeah,
be harsh, but like, you can't be sitting back in Michigan or wherever and be like, I want your best OTC. It's like,
yeah,
no one that has a good thing going is going to tell
yeah,
you that.
yeah, exactly.
And
And
they even
I've
get
always,
on me on the podcast. They're like, well, you just don't do enough on OTC. I'm like, that's because no one wants to tell you their spot, because it's only going to be good for 2 more years if
you
they
know,
tell me,
you know, I,
and or tell you or tell anybody else. Because if you tell one person, that person tells a person, and that person tells a person, it's just like, you know,
it's no, that's the way it goes. And I think a lot of people don't realize the amount of work and years it's taken to even, find these things. Um, but I keep them pretty tight, honestly. The I've always had a saying that cream rises to the top, and if you're a really truly a good hunter, you should be able to go in and figure it out, or at least over time figure it out. I mean, it's not rocket science.
right.
You get in there and hunt, and I mean that's kind of how I played this year. I mean, I went into a unit fourth rifle season. I mean, I had a little history in there. I mean, but I hadn't been in that unit in 10 years, and um, I was so chalked up, as with all these tags that my family drew, and I couldn't even hunt for myself till fourth rifle. And a good friend of mine, we just picked up leftover tags and for a unit that had some tags left, and I was like, well, we'll just go hunt. And I think by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, opening day, we had 2 bulls laying on the ground. And
Yeah.
and went into a spot that I think the last time I'd probably been there, I was 10 years old. But it just, I mean, there's elk everywhere. But it's just a matter of, like, if you go in and use your glass and kind of know what you're looking for. And I mean, but it's kind of trial by fire, really. And it's kind of cool to see sometimes guys that will come out of state and they put the work in. These guys that actually camped next to me this year, fourth rifle, they came out from Arkansas, just poured over Onyx for a couple months and somehow picked the same dot I did, and they came out and they killed 2 bulls in a 5-day hunt. And I respect those guys for that, because they didn't take a handout. They just showed up and put the work in, and that's really what it is just putting the work in.
Right.
But,
Touch on goats and sheep. Tell me your picks for goats and your picks for sheep.
like top units.
Yeah.
Goats probably right now. I'm probably gonna say G5 is pretty good. That's down south. And then really all these units right here around the bells. So I think we're looking at like G12, then G16. Basically, any of these slew units. I mean, there's really not a unit I would say that's better or worse, but definitely right now, if you start looking at the quotas, definitely the maroon bells and the areas around the Collegiate Peaks are the most liberal with tags and have the most goat numbers. But they're, if I was sitting on a pile of goat points, which I am right now, I'd be looking around the Collegiate Peaks areas or the Maroon Bells Wilderness areas, because there's a dang lot of goats right now. I don't know if you got out like up around Snowmass Lake at all, Jay, but I mean, it's nothing to go and glass 40 goats up right there above Maroon Lake or any of that.
Yeah, I see them when I'm hiking around for sure.
Yeah.
What about sheep?
Sheep, man, my top pick for sheep. So my favorite, obviously, is the unit I outfit in. I like S54. They're in the West Elks. They only give 2 tags, and we did finally start getting a non-resident sheep tag in there. But good rams in there, really cool country. Um, that's kind of my favorite. The other one I really like would be S2, which is Cougar Canyon. That'd be basically just right there west of Fort Collins. Had a good friend actually pull that tag.
I want to bounce back here to the S54, the 2 tags that you guys have.
Yeah.
So in that unit, if they draw a tag, you guys can take them and sheep hunt in S54.
Yes. Yep, we've got all of that. So that would pretty much all
permit.
Yep, all under our permit. So that would give us really the main basins of where those sheep are. And where they live, it's tough, nasty country. And that's kind of what I really like about that unit, is because you get the true essence of a sheep hunt. Some of these other units along the I-70 corridor, let's take S-74, for instance, which would be Glenwood Canyon. Like you're basically hunting rams off the highway, and I think half of what sheep hunting is the experience. And that's something you get in S-54, because you're 10, 12 miles in, horseback spike camp, and hunting some really tough terrain. And that's always at least when I envision sheep hunting, that's what you get in S-54.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, Tenderfoot Outfitters, how do guys find out about Tenderfoot? How do they reach out to you? Give me your best channels for if people want to chat with you about Tenderfoot.
Okay. You can check us out at tenderfoot-outfitters.com. We're also on Instagram, tfoutfitters.com. And you can reach us directly at 1-800-641-0504.
Okay, awesome. So we need snow to have better fishing in the Roaring Fork Valley. In your opinion, it's probably way too early to even start talking about runoff because we're right smack dab in March. But you would just assume have a bunch of snow and have a long runoff period and let those fish have some space, right?
Oh, totally. I mean, we need it right now. I mean, the river is just downright low, and what it's doing is it's concentrated these fish. They're packed in the holes they can find, and it's
people are hammering them.
Oh yeah, I mean the biggest issue right now is the lower Colorado River is the only really floatable river right now in western Colorado. So we're getting a lot of attention from Denver on the weekends, and I mean, it's just busy, and this whole coronavirus thing, it's got a lot of people not working, so they're fishing. And I've definitely, this last 2 months of fishing, it's probably been the worst fishing I've seen in the valley for a while. Like usually all of us guys, we really look forward to this March, April timeframe, because that's when things really start picking up. We start getting more bug life in the water, and the streamer bite starts up. And man, like right now, I think 2 weeks ago at the boat ramp in Silt, actually, there was at 9 o'clock in the morning, I had 22 boat trailers there. So definitely busy, and people are wanting to get out for sure, but we definitely need some big snow here in the next 2 months to get these rivers filled up in late May and June, and even into July. I mean, I'd be okay with runoff going into mid-July at this point, and just even for our animals' sake, for the elk and the deer, and we need the grass, we need the water, and everything that goes with it.
For sure. Cole, it's always great talking to you. I look forward to seeing you this summer and getting in the boat and doing some fishing and ripping some lips and throwing some streamers and getting after it. So let's hope for some more snow, and we'll be chatting at you. Thanks for giving us information and filling us in on Tenderfoot, and appreciate all of your knowledge. All right, buddy?
Yeah, good talking to you, Jay.
All right, buddy. God bless. Take care.
Thank you.